All right, we're calling to order 12 o'clock. Oh, there's Kate, good.
I don't like it when we all have to sit on one side because we can't see each other.
Why don't you go over there?
You don't have to sit on one side.
Eric, come over here.
What are we doing?
Sandy's bossing us around.
She's trying to say if you need to get over there.
You want to look in my face?
Yep.
Let me get a good look at your face.
I want to look at everybody else's face.
Does Michael know we're in here?
He's out there.
Okay. All right. Will you stick your head out there and tell Michael Miller, he's the fellow wearing the sunglasses inside.
Matt? All right, I move to adopt the agenda.
All right, we've got a motion to adopt the agenda. Do I have a second? All right, all in favor of adopting the agenda?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, there we are.
Oh, we're taking an executive session.
I'm sorry.
No, we're not skipping the election of the committee of the whole chair. All right, so we've got election of committee of the whole chair.
I move to nominate Chris Dobbs to be committee of the whole chair.
Second.
All right.
Motion and a second.
All right, so are we normally taking more motions, or we just took
Are
this?
there any other nominations from the floor?
Hearing none. All right, so
I have a
all.
nomination.
Okay, good.
Donald Trump.
Well, that makes some pretty easy discussion there. Okay. All right. So all in favor of. You got crack wise. All right. All in favor of Chris Dobbs as committee of the. Can I do that? Okay. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? All right, then that passes. All right, we've already adopted the agenda, thanks to Todd. Approval of minutes. Do anybody want to make a motion to approve the
Move
minutes?
to approve,
This is SEC policy and operations.
right, move to approve the 3.A, 3.B, and 3.C.
Okay.
Second is one motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, very good. And executive session is the next item. Anybody want to make the motion we go into executive session?
I make a motion, we go into executive session.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, do we want to go somewhere else? Do we want to do it here?
Yeah, we're going somewhere. There's a place we're going. Erica told us.
We're back in open session. All right, it says public comments. Do we have any public comments for the committee of the whole? Hearing none, we are now going to start up the Strategic Education Committee segment. Where's Priscilla? She in here?
No, she's snacking. Go ahead and run it for her in her absence.
All right. So I'm going to let Ms. Coates lead the Strategic Education Committee until Ms. Jeffrey gets back.
Okay, so the first item we have is the strategic priorities, and Dr. Postlewaite, you're doing the presenting.
I'm starting at least. Erica Taylor deserves the credit for all of this work, for heading it up along with Beth Havens and a lot of other people. What we did was list for the board all the opportunities that the board has had for participation and all the opportunities that community members and staff members have had for participation. That was in the background section. Just to make sure, just a little recap on what all has been done so far. What we're recommending for the board is that you approve the strategic plan today, but that the board comes back in January and identifies your priorities. I've talked with you about 3 strategic priorities. One is doing what we need to do to make sure that many more students are really on grade level by the end of grade 3. 2 is investing in attracting, keeping, and supporting talented folks in our district. And 3 is making sure that we redistribute resources, time, people, and money, aimed toward meeting the most serious needs of our district. Those are my 3 strategic priorities. The board has talked about a couple more strategic priorities related to the arts and to choice magnet schools. Those are just a couple of examples. When you come back in January in conjunction with the superintendent's evaluation, you would set your own strategic priorities, and then we would develop a 3 to 5 year implementation plan, putting the strategic priorities alongside the budget, looking at what we can actually afford as we shoot out. How do we find the resources to address the strategic priorities? Because if we're not really careful, in no time at all, our board will be back in the same situation budget-wise that we were in 3 years ago. So we have to bring those things forward together. So today we're asking for approval of the plan itself with the understanding that the board will set the strategic priorities.
So how does this document match this one that we got at our last committee of the whole meeting?
As far as I know, they're exactly the same document, except the last section on the goals may have been revised somewhat. The final section, the district goals and mega goals, would have been established with baseline data from this year. So there may have been some revisions. There could have been refinements to the plan and revisions in the end. When you received all the action team recommendations, those aren't actually part of the plan. Today, you just have the plan.
So that's where we had I think that's what created the confusion in the past, is we were given stuff at different stages and then not told how it all came down the road together. So how is this part of this? So
it is not.
Okay.
What you have today to approve are the high-level strategies. The action teams came forward and told you what they've been working on, what they recommend that you consider. That part you take into consideration in January. You don't have enough money to do everything that was in those action team presentations, but we wanted you to hear the presentations before you actually adopt the plan, which is what was in your packets today.
So Michael, try it.
So we're going to use what's in that notebook in the three-ring binder when we talk a little bit more detail on the priorities that we as a board want to have. Right. But we're approving the actual strategic plan today.
Yes.
Well, so do we have money to do everything in the strategic plan we're approving today?
No, it's not an action plan. It's just saying strategically, we approve these directions, but that doesn't commit you. What you need now, coming in January, would be to set the goals for this coming year and to think in terms of 3 to 5 years out.
So if this is the strategic plan, then this is how to implement the strategic plan?
Those are recommendations coming from the action team.
From how to do these goals?
Right, but the board does not approve those action team recommendations along with the plan.
Right, so this is the plan.
Right.
The way this interacts with the plan is these are some of the strategies staff has come up with to meet the strategic goals in this book here.
Yes, ma'am.
And how did the strategic goals in this book here get created? Those would be those public meetings, and I think you said at the very beginning of your presentation you showed how that happened.
Yes, ma'am. That's on the agenda form.
So just because, I'd like to get that on record if you don't mind, and you all have it in front of you. But so the strategic plan has been under development for several months, and there were numerous opportunities for input provided to board and stakeholders, including 50 community, business, parents, educators, board members in the original visioning group 18 months ago, a 55-member district team that met at least once per month following that community kickoff, 700 plus community members, school principals and teachers, and parents at the Strategic Planning Symposium in January 2017. More than 15 listening sessions this summer for teachers, 7 sessions, parents 2, principals 1, students 1, and community members 4. Visits to 85 schools and programs to meet with principals and teachers, reviewing the plan contents and encouraging them to serve on an action team. So somebody from central staff basically visited every school, got a visit, and so those teachers could hear about the plan. The draft was reviewed by CCSD principals at county principal meetings on February 16, 2017. Open office hours and listening sessions in all 8 constituent boards plus 1 session specifically for countywide magnet, 6 advisory cabinets, 1 each for parents, teachers, students, principals, classified staff, and business community members, with approximately 200 total cabinet members who reviewed the plan and suggested priorities, approximately 80 teacher roundtable members, 28 action teams with more than 160 members.
So Thank you. So guys, what you're saying is action item 6.1A in our book. Michael, you looking for it? I think you have hard copies.
I got it.
So this tells you who created this.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Then the mega goals back here, and I guess because I just don't want people to be confused, why isn't this in here? If this is part, is this something we're approving as well?
Those are baseline data. They aren't goals. That just gives you the status as of 2017, and you will come back in January and approve what goals this board wants to set. So
In these areas?
yes, ma'am, and everything that we measure, that's everything we are capable of measuring right now.
So everything on behind this cover sheet is basically everything that we're capable of measuring right now. And this would probably be a good conversation to have as well with the evaluation process.
Yes, ma'am.
And then this is all of the meetings that began approximately 18 months ago
Yes, ma'am.
and created this document.
Yes, ma'am.
And then this is what your staff said they can do to make sure these goals get met,
Those-
if we're willing to fund
Yes.
and approve them.
Yes, but that notebook represents the input from community members, parents, students.
It represents
any
this.
stakeholder who wants to who wanted to participate. Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions?
I think great, I just want to say
We
great
are-
work by the staff.
we are
and-
on specific-
And I
our
look forward to us
SEC, Cindy was
putting
leading
all of this into work,
while
to
you're out.
place.
Thank you.
All right, do we
does-
need a motion to approve?
Yes, we do need a motion to approve, and we need a second for
Move
discussion.
to approve the strategic plan.
Is there any discussion? Does anybody have any questions about the strategic plan or how something got into it before you vote to approve it?
I do.
Go right ahead, Michael.
The district mega goals, to me, should be, although they're not, it just gives a status report of where we are now, like the indicators and focus areas. To me, that seems like that should drive our strategic plan. I know that these documents are compiled by community members and stakeholders and meetings that have been held under the CCSD umbrella to get a bigger snapshot of where we are and what we possibly need to be doing. But like I've said in the past, I think our fundamental goal ought to be that every child is in grade level. I think you can't get more simplistic than that. We don't have that currently. We're nowhere near that currently. And so for me, the goals or our strategic plan should be centered around that effort and all of the energies and people, whether it be manpower and or programs that are necessary for us to achieve that, in my opinion, ought to be in this plan, and if not in here, and if not in there, on this.
Madam Chair, I think that's what it is, because I'm looking at this one that says percentage of kids reading, and we're not happy with this. So we have an area that specifically talks about early childhood literacy. I think that matches exactly what you just said. We don't think this is good, so one of our strategies needs to be a goal for that. So I can, now that you said that, I can actually see the correlation. We've got teacher retention, and there is a goal in here about developing a pipeline of talent and retention and promotion. So it seems like you're absolutely correct. That's what's in here, so thank you. Now I feel better about voting for it.
Right, so the goals that are here in the strategic plan, goal 1 through 8, on the document that we have presented to us, it shows those same goals and then some indicators underneath those. So that's what's underneath there. And then we as a board, we want to approve this plan, and then in January, we can talk about what we see as the priorities, what we want at the top of the list, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Are we ready to vote?
Call the question.
Okay, all those in favor of accepting, signify signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Are you opposed, Michael?
I am.
So is this going to be on the board meeting this afternoon, or are we moving this to the board meeting in January?
On the meeting this afternoon.
Is there something that you need addressed, or is this just more of a you?
I just,
Because if you have concerns, I might have concerns.
well,
What is it?
since I've been on the board, I've looked at and seen and been a part of plans in the past. And for me, even though they may be identified in a plan,
Yeah.
my concern becomes our ability to execute.
Okay.
And because it's so broad, it does not identify, in my opinion, it does not identify a said school, a said classroom, a said student. And so then my concern then becomes how realistic is our ability to deliver on these plans. And because they're not specific enough for me, it makes me feel as if they're not specific because we're not really looking to do all that we say. Because it looks good, it's nice and furry, and it's warm and fuzzy. But we have serious issues at some of our schools. And I wonder if I were a principal, if I were a teacher in a school and I saw this plan, would I in fact see my needs, the needs that I see every day in this plan?
No.
Is it addressed? And if it's not, when will it be addressed? The board's we're gonna set our own, our own criteria and how we're gonna do that, and we hardly ever agree on anything. So, you see what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I think from a student standpoint, how does a parent, or when does a parent see their child's progress, implementation, readiness for college, students ready to earn a high school diploma on time? Where do they see themselves in this plan? I don't know if they do. I don't know if that plan is designed to do that much detail.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of detail
And I
that,
respect that. I think that's a good thing.
So, Michael, I hear what you're saying. The thing is, in a strategic plan, we're never gonna have that detail. I mean,
I ask a
this
question?
is something we've worked on for 18 months, and I would hope that all 9 of us would approve it. What you wanna see, that specific information, once this is approved, then these goals on here, particularly number one, which is maximize student achievement to ensure every student is career, college, and citizenship ready, then the staff's job is to go and make sure that every school has a plan to make sure those things are happening. So you're never gonna, there's never gonna have something that just says, how are we doing this at Burns, or how are we doing this? Eventually they should report on that for us, but the staff has got to have plans at the district level and then at the school level to make those things happen. But a strategic plan by its nature does not address those school site specifics.
but unfortunately, that's what I'm looking for. Like when you just read that first goal, instead of that being a period there, I'd like to see a equal sign, and then on top of it comes up with outcomes. When are we going to maximize?
Until you approve
Right.
this.
But it's going to, even if I don't vote for it today, it will still be approved. So then my question still exists: is when do we deliver, Priscilla, maximum academic achievement to ensure every student is career, college, and citizenship ready? When do we deliver that? When can we expect that?
Every day.
No. That sounds good. Seriously, guys, that sounds good, but that's not what we're doing.
Right.
That's not what we have done.
You have a strategic plan. The strategic plan is the overarching, what do we want to do? The how is next, after the strategic plan. The strategic plan is not going to be.
Well, then
the
maybe
how.
I'm waiting on the how.
Well,
You
no,
are.
You can't do that until
You
you
are.
approve the how. We approve this, and
Right,
then
that's
you
okay.
get the what.
It's going to be
That's
approved.
okay, and the
The one
feedback is what
dissenting vote will not stop it. But ultimately, I am looking for, Kate, I am looking for the how. Because
Right,
we've been
you
looking
are,
for,
but you gotta do the
May I?
what before the
I
how.
don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. But I think our children deserve and our parents deserve the how. I understand the district leaders deserve the.
Okay,
Well, I think.
I'm
I
next.
think a piece of the puzzle.
I'm next.
Oh, you're next? Go ahead.
The one thing, Michael, you need to know is you don't disagree with anything we're saying, and we don't disagree with anything you're saying. This is it depends on how organized you lay something out. Just because I believe in this plan as a strategic plan doesn't mean I don't care about the how, or drilling it down to how did we put 2 teachers in certain classrooms, which we did this year. So we are doing things this year that we didn't do last year.
Correct.
That is, according to the principals, things they believe in their expert opinion is working. So I don't want any principal who sees this on video to assume that a blanket statement, if we're not doing it, we're not doing anything. We're sitting in here full of, shrimp and cookies. Those principals are making an impact based on the things we put in place for this year. But I know what you're looking for. I would applaud the organization. If you don't think reading is important, then you're not going to make a goal for saying who should be taught to read. Then you're not going to create a budget that spends money on reading, and then you're not going to hold her accountable for who learned how to read. And you can't hold her accountable for who learned how to read until you create a budget that says this is a goal, and you can't create a budget that says this is a goal until you create a goal based on your priorities. So there's a process. And my hope is that if we agree these are the things we want to have happen in CCSD, if you don't think these are the things that should be happening, then we're not going to make goals for these things. That these goals do get set very quickly in January. And I'm saying that to the person who's in charge of creating the evaluation process, Eric, because very quickly after you decide what you want to do, you better decide how much of it you want to do and then how to do it.
Yes, okay, I was just going to add, Jill, I was just add to what Michael was saying. So if Michael has this feeling, and I like to joke with some of you folks, you've heard it, like Michael and I seem to agree with like 90% of things, and it's like, whoa. But I tend to agree that if Michael's feeling this way, then there are people in the community who would feel the same way, and they want to see the rubber hit the road once we approve this thing.
It can't be a delay.
No, I mean, I think there needs to be feedback regular, and to let not only the people around the table, but the public obviously know what we're doing to implement. That's all I want to say.
Mr. Reverend Knapp.
I was just going to add that, based on what Mike was saying, I believe there's an element that has been developed by the district, and from my understanding is in place as a dashboard for each student.
Yeah.
Which is a drill down of the assessment of where
He's
that student
actually got
is.
it.
So in reality, the strategic plan is the outer layer, but the dashboard that drills down on that component, I mean, gives the parent, the teacher, the student, a snapshot of where that child is. And I think I believe that's one of the tools that's being used to help drive which students need special area or need assistance or need tutoring, whatever that may be, to caveat that same piece that you're talking about. Are we reaching the lower level of those students with those resources? And it is my hope that we are, that is being driven by that dashboard. So I believe that's the element that you're talking about that's already in place.
It's there.
Yeah.
If we have a goal that says every kid reads on 3rd grade level, and we have a dashboard for every single 3rd grader, and a rule in place that says you meet with the parents of every single 3rd grader, then that is exactly what you're asking for. Wait a minute, district, you said every single 3rd grader would read. I'm here, here's my dashboard, why am I not on level? That actually drills it directly to the person.
First of all, I just want to say one thing before it goes. I'm not saying that the plan is a bad plan. I'm not saying that. I think Cindy's right. I agree with you guys. I do. But what I have seen in the past is we've set goals as a district. And when it comes down to implementing those goals or setting a standard in which we measure ourselves, I've heard from people in this room who work for us, the reason why we haven't reached these goals, Mr. Miller, or because those kids are poor, or because those kids live in this community. To me, setting a goal, reaching a goal with deliverable outcomes, and then when we don't reach those goals, we step aside on our responsibility, to me is sickening. I agree that there's a lot of things that we cannot control inside our system. Where a child lives, the family life, we don't control that. But when they're in our care for 180 days a year, we are charged to educate. And when we do not, what I have heard is, well, Mr. Miller, well, those kids are poor. or those kids are black, or those kids live this way, or they live that way. That's all I'm saying.
I would beg you to tell me who those people are. I would beg you,
And you know
in
what?
private or in public, I would beg you to tell me who those people are. I don't think I've ever in 7 years led you to believe that I wouldn't throw a hissy fit.
I'm just saying, Cindy, we've been in the same room when it's
Right, but you made a very specific thing that said there are people that work for us who sidestepped
Yeah.
this. I would beg you to tell me who those people are.
Don't call me, you know, I'll do it.
Okay. Are we ready to now move on to B?
Jump in it.
Okay. Grade configuration and zoning, Lucy Beckman High School.
Thank God Lucy Beckham ain't in North Charleston. Y'all have fun with that. First world problems, Kevin.
Don't be sitting next to me. Touch me now.
Did he say it? Did he say it? I know where he lives. I'll go find him.
I'll hold my comments at my press conference.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So I guess our first question is, how did y'all manage to upset everybody that lives on one side of a river?
Don't worry, that's not everybody.
Just a super majority.
Okay, we are here today to bring back information. The original recommendation that we made in August was for the opening grade configuration of Lucy Beckham High School to be a phased-in model, where we start with 9th and 10th grade and then add 11th and 12th grade the following 2 years. And I think you have some background on that. It should be in your packet. We were asked to go back and to get more information. We held 2 additional community meetings. We had about 150 people attend those meetings. We also sent a survey out to approximately 3,000 families. Had about 700 responses to that survey. And we had a focus group with some students to get their direct impact or their direct input and opinions on what we were presenting. Based on that information, we are standing by the recommendation that we made originally to phase in the opening of Beckham, to start 9th and 10th grade and to phase that in. So the exact same reasons that we had before, looking to build AP and CTE programs, building those programs would be better for the students if we were allowed to gradually add those in. We talked, and one interesting point that came up was about the post-secondary opportunities, scholarships, internships, those kinds of things, and allowing current 11th and 12th grade students to finish their program at Wando High School. We talked about extracurricular events, and again, allowing 11th and 12th grade, because we're probably going to have to open with a JV program for athletics. Making sure that we open with a strong positive culture and climate, and if we force students to leave Wando in their junior and senior year, then that could, cause some problems or some issues. And really looking at the impact that it would have on Wando. While we're gradually growing, it would allow them to gradually decrease in their population. So it wouldn't be quite as stark, losing 1,500 students on day one. So, that's it.
Move for approval.
Second.
The school's going to hold how many students again?
1,500.
So with the 9th and 10th grade, that'll give you,
About, if we started just about 740, 760, right in there.
and you said that's so the kids wouldn't leave Wando to come in the junior.
That would just be
senior year?
9th and 10th grade.
Right, I heard that. What I'm asking is, the reason for that is so that juniors and seniors would not leave Wando to come to the
Right.
school?
Correct.
I mean, that's the only rationale?
No, I mean, we've outlined all of those here.
I mean, if they leave the school, how would that hurt the school? So, with so many students there already, how would that hurt anything?
Well, can I
Yes.
we had 2 big public meetings with
Yes.
people, and at first, when they recommended that, we have heard from a few community members that said, I want my 11th grader to be able to go to Beckham because it's going to be closer, et cetera.
Right.
So we asked staff to go and do a bunch of community input, which they did. Once I was there and heard the research that they'd done, where they looked at most communities when they open a new school, they do this phased opening, 9,
Right.
10. then 11, and then 12. That's how they did it in Dorchester County. There was a school that did it differently than that, and they had lots of issues. The other issue is there are kids who have been on a certain path at Wando with a certain major, and they'll want to be able to finish that.
Right.
We talked to Chris and I said, well, why don't you let them go to Beckham or stay at Wando? Well, Jeff told us, that would be a transportation nightmare. We would only be able to transport kids to one school, to Beckham. We wouldn't be able to transport them to Wando. And so there were so many reasons that it just made sense for the kids who are already at Beckham in 9th and 10th grade, so they've got a lot of their high school behind them and they're on a specific path to be able to finish those programs. We have the CAS, and some kids from both Beckham and Wando will use the CAS, but there are kids who will have 11th and 12th graders who, if they were forced to go to Beckham, they'll have their English, math, social studies, and science, but other classes, other electives, they may only be able to take those at Wando. So
I understand what you're saying, and my thoughts are that I'm wondering if the students have the option to stay at Wando or to take a new school. Since the building's already built and the money is to follow the student anyhow, would that actually hurt anything? Is what I'm really getting at. Would that hurt anything if the students they're not in that career path, but they need to CAS and they just want to go to Beckham, they love Beckham there?
We won't have the same programs.
Right.
So if they're in culinary, for example, at Wando, we won't have culinary at Beckham. And we actually asked a group of seniors, or they're currently freshmen, and 95% of them, we have a small group, there's about 30 kids, 95% of them said that they would stay at Wando. They would choose to stay at Wando.
I think a lot of them would stay at Wando.
Right, exactly. And so that's why we're, again, recommending 9-10 to start.
Michael.
Because they're not going to want to change.
I saw in the recommendation that we're still, I believe, waiting on the District 2 Constituent Board to do something with the lines. So I think Chris has brought up a really good point. So are we going to have a really, I wouldn't call it a laxed transfer policy, but I would assume that a student's ability to transfer either from Beckham to Wando or back and forth would be a little easier per se, because maybe it's the same constituent district, it's in the same basically geographical area and location, but based on the needs of the student, I don't want to take, I'm not a culinary arts, I want to take that, it's at that campus, vice versa. And so where is District 2, or how secure does District 2 feel? And do they have a timeline of when they will draw the new attendance lines? Are they,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are they done with that, or have they
No.
started that process yet?
No, they're currently working on rezoning for the new Moultrie expansion.
Okay.
And once that starts, their goal is to announce a year before, so Moultrie will open in 2019, so they'll announce in 2018. Their decision was that if Beckham opens in 2020, they would announce in 19.
Okay.
They would start their work in 18.
Okay. All right.
So that's next on their Cindy plan.
So, I think the question is, when we open Lucy Beckham, do we put 4 years worth of teachers in there and every program that we're going to offer when it's fully staffed? There's no rule against that, except it's money, and you got to figure out where you're not going to spend money to do that. I think that's the conversation that each of us has to have if we're going to draw that vote. I know that we can't draw the attendance zone lines. If you drew the attendance zone lines in any way, I just don't know, how do you staff a school when you don't know who's coming?
Exactly.
Because you don't know how many 11th and 12th graders are going to want to go to Beckham versus you don't know how many are going to be zoned at Beckham that are going to tell you, how dare you not provide me transportation to what has been my home school with my friends for the last 12 years.
Yeah, all the option, yeah.
So I think that there's some logistics, and it may be worth it that if the board could get a feel for what 9th and 10th grade costs versus fully fleshed, how soon we've got to come up with that could help. And the only other recommendation I would ask of the board, I know we have a motion on the floor in a second, is I feel like part of the reason we have a committee of the whole structure is so that we talk about these things, but that we go home and have a few weeks to think about them before we have to make that vote.
Not today.
We have people who are going to who are gonna say they didn't know, despite the fact that I knew and I live 25 miles away. I mean, but that's human nature. Does this decision, can it be made in January? Can we put this on the website and give
Feedback.
time that is in the public domain? That the board, because how we vote today certainly sends a signal of what we're considering and allows the public time to respond, react, and then we vote on it in January. I'm just uncomfortable with this decision being made 2 hours after we make this decision.
I like that idea too, Cindy.
What? You guys agree?
Yeah, we
Put
agree.
that on Facebook, why don't you?
All right.
Then call the question.
Instagram.
Okay.
Questions, Nicole?
So may I make a friendly amendment that, Doctor?
I was just going to point out, I'm not sure what the motion was, but the agenda says approve grade configuration and send to the January 22nd board meeting.
Because it's listed here as a board agenda item for December 11th. So this is a January item?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, okay, who made the original motion?
I made a motion.
I
What was
seconded.
your motion
To approve what was recommended there, the grade configuration for 9-10, and have us vote on it at our January board meeting.
And I seconded that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
And we're voting to vote in January, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Who opposed?
Right.
No. You want to get them all at one time?
Okay.
Yep.
He's got a
You didn't see
personal
me.
reason.
Did I miss it?
South Carolina Accountability System,
talked after,
Cindy
we talked
Ambrose, Lord Jones, and some principals who have not been named. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for all the work you're doing on that.
We'll have Ryan come back, Jeremy,
How far back?
and Michelle Simmons join us.
Who? Traitor.
There's a seat down there.
Come on, Jeremy, sit next to me. Michael's not that mean.
Good afternoon, board. We've got the presentation up there, but you guys have nice half-page color handouts. I think that I saw you guys flipping through
Yes,
that.
the handout's on the table, not on.
What are we doing?
Yep. We have handouts up here as well.
So is this what we're going through?
You have it up there?
With the red dots.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we're starting with the red box.
And this is information only?
Information only.
It's in there. It's in there.
Yep.
This is it?
It says accountability on the top.
Yeah, so flip the page, we'll just insert it in there. So we start right there and it'll pick up. So this is all our
That's
slides.
deceiving.
Yeah, so it's all the red slides kind of stand out for you. I'm Jeremy Carrick, I'm principal, RB Stall High School. I had two other folks that joined me. We have done a series of meetings, just getting information from the State Department to be aware of the accountability system that's coming down from the state. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Ryan, come back from principal at Moultrie Middle School.
Michelle Simmons, Principal, Stono Park Elementary, soon to be Director of Elementary School starting January.
Just wanted to start by setting the goals. When we went to the Education Oversight Committee, they set those EOC goals for the state, and that was that by 2035, the on-time graduation rate in the state of South Carolina would be 90%. They furthermore wanted to see that we would see our students increase every year the amount that were college ready, career ready, and that could enter into a community college without the need for remediation. That kind of aligned with what our South Carolina state plan was. So our Department of Education also set goals that are a little bit more specific than the EOC goals, and that was looking on that bottom slide there that 90% of students would reach that level 2 or higher, or a C or higher, or pass an end of course assessment. And also by 2035, 70% of students would score a 3 or higher on the SC Ready or a C or higher. And that also we would see 90% of our students become college, career, and citizenship ready. So those were huge goals that the state set out. The 2035 date, they said, aligns with students who are being born this year. So 17, 18 children, 18 years from now, we're able to reach and achieve these goals.
You sure hope so.
That's right.
So on the next page, there's two breakdowns for how a school can be rated, and the elementary and middle schools are clumped together and rated the same way, or you have the same calculation. The first way is whether or not your elementary and middle school has 20 or more English language learners. So 20 or more ESL students, your breakdown of the way your rating is calculated is based on academic achievement and academic growth. and that's 80% of your total score. So if you have 20 or more ESOL students, 35% of that will be on the academic achievement at the end of the year, spring test. Then what it does is it looks at growth, and there's two different ways of measuring growth. First, on or two different groups. The bottom 20th percentile, all students scoring in the bottom 20%, and then all students and how they score in their academic achievement. So what's important to note about that breakdown is that all schools have a bottom 20th percentile. So Moultrie has a group of students that's scoring in the bottom 20th percentile. Academic Magnet has a group of students that are in the lowest 20th percentile. And they'll count twice, essentially. Finally, with 20 or more ESL students, that group, that cohort, will count for 10% of your overall rating. So that's the 80%. And then finally, 20% is school quality. So 10% of that 20 will be the score on SC Pass, Science and Social Studies, and then the 10% will be on the student survey that's submitted at the end of the year.
May I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Two questions. Is this a 2035 goal like the graduation rate, or is this more immediate?
This will start next year.
So this is standard for 18-19.
Yes, ma'am.
And is it 20 students or 20% of the student population?
20 individual students.
So if I have a school that's got 400 kids and it's got 20 students, and I have a school that has 1,200 kids, you see where I'm going, and it's got 20.
Yes, ma'am.
It's 20 as a number, okay.
So Moultrie, for example, we have 27 students that are.
And then up here in the north area, I've got one that's 90%.
Correct.
Same rating scale.
So what that means is that group will count just as much for me at Moultrie as the entire school would count on SC Pass, which is the social studies and science. So that's very important in considering how many ESL students and EL students you have.
Thank you.
I have another question quickly. School quality under the 10% student survey measuring learning environment. I'm assuming that's where you got that from. How do they measure that? I mean, I know it's a survey, but who takes the survey? Is it the teachers, the principal, is it the parents?
It's the students, and more information to come on that. How that looks or how the rollout, what that'll look like is still left.
Ongoing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, gotcha. See why I don't like plans, right?
But I think they put that, I know they put that science and social studies in there because they're not obligated to put it in the achievement area, but it's still very important. So they at least had a place to put it.
School quality.
But Michael brings up a good point. We don't get to decide how this is executed or what it looks like. We're waiting on somebody else to do it. As he said, the sooner we know, the better. Do we have any idea when they're going to finalize this document?
They said that for the school
survey,
I think, is just in procurement by the State Department.
So we'll never know what the questions are, any of that stuff. It's just going to be when it comes. Okay.
I think eventually we'd have, it'd be similar to, do I feel safe at school?
Are you satisfied with the learning environment? Are you satisfied with school?
But we don't have any.
I imagine it'd be similar.
But we
to
don't
what
have
our
any input
previous
at this level. That's a state
I'm assuming they'll
decision.
probably be ready by next school year term, I would assume.
So, the next page down at the bottom there, we have elementary and middle schools with fewer than 20 English language learners. We do have several schools in the district that would fall into this category. The distribution of points is slightly different. 40% of that score will be the performance composite for all students in English language arts and math. And then you get 20% growth for all students, and then 20% growth in English and math for your bottom 20th percentile. So, and then the 20% for school quality is identical to whether or not you have more than 20 or fewer than 20 ELL students.
Okay.
All right.
When you look down at the breakdown for high schools, how their ratings are going to be calculated, 25% for the high schools will be through academic achievement. That's going to be end of course exam performance for students on English 1 and Algebra 1 EOCs. 25% is going to come from our graduation rate. The state is looking for a minimum 70% graduation rate from our high schools and are going to award anything with a 90% graduation rate or above as excellent in that area of graduation rate. Okay. And then for this one, the first example was also with 20 or more English language learners. So any high schools with 20 or more English language learners will have 10% of the rating category or evaluated from the growth of those students. Our school quality measure includes 25% for college and career readiness.
Is it measured by ACT?
It's measured by 9 metrics that we're gonna break that one down in detail, but the percentage of students that are college and career ready, again, 5% at the high school level is gonna come from that school quality survey, and then 10% in the area of science and social studies. For us, that's gonna be evaluated through US history end of course exam and biology 1 end of course exam, each of those being 5%. When you look at the table below that, all you're doing is when you take out that 10% for English language learners, you increase the graduation rate for those schools to 30% of their overall rating, and you increase their academic achievement, English and math, EOCs to 30%.
The next domain speaks specifically to progress, students moving from one year to the next. Ryan alluded to it earlier when he said that the state is putting a significant emphasis on student growth and movement, so much so that they will be counted in terms of their reading and math growth, all children. Okay. How are they moving from one year to the next? And then again, looking at the very bottom 20%. The state law dictates that a value-added measure be incorporated into this growth assessment. And so we believe that for this initial 17-18 year, that will be EBOS, specifically looking at growth. So if I were to give you an example of how that might look, a student will take the test, say in 3rd grade, get an initial achievement indicator. The EBOS system will compare that student's initial achievement to students who scored like them and look at what their growth should be from year to year. Looking at marked growth from year to year, basically is how that will be assessed.
So we've kind of, as a board, come to understand what MAP means. We know that if they start here and we look at a mid-year and an end, how does that correlate into this?
So EBOS, if you would recollect, we had to do some roster verifying to determine which teacher is responsible for which academic areas. So EBOS is a very sophisticated formula that's going to look at a gains-based model, whereas I'm going to compare how you did in 3rd grade to where you should be performing in 4th grade.
Is MAP going to be used to?
It's not MAP at all. It's the state test.
It's the state
ready
accountability test.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But the MAP assessment will help teachers in the classroom guide and plan for instruction.
But this is measured on SC Ready, but it doesn't measure, it measures whether you've hit that grade level and that standard.
Right.
Not whether you grew the year you were in there. Because if you start the 5th grade and you're a lot behind, and you in the 5th grade and you're just a little bit behind,
then you grew. You moved.
This doesn't capture that.
Yeah, yes, it does. This is looking at
that.
growth.
Okay.
Just not for MAP. It's looking at it for SC Ready.
Right.
But MAP does give us a good indication of how well they will do on the SC Ready test at the end of the year.
Right.
Okay.
Next slide.
Is there any indication, I hate to say this and I'm laughing, but is there any indication that the state will change the test?
Their mind?
Because oftentimes they'll use one test and then they'll use another test, so it makes it really difficult for systems like ours to measure student performance, teacher effectiveness. If you use SC Ready and you use MAP and you use something else,
So if you would recall, we haven't had a report card since 2014.
Right.
And we've had a couple of bridge years because we've had different tests. So this is the 2nd consistent year of SC Ready. So we feel like SC Ready will be the test moving forward for the next several years.
Yeah, I think the contract was for 5 years, so we should have a few more years with SC Ready.
And to be clear, this is a state law that we have to utilize in 17-18 or 18-19, because we've talked about.
We'll have a rating in fall of 18, and it will relate to this year.
Based on this school year's data. The next slide simply gives you an idea of what the point structure looks like. So for every child who takes a test, they will be assigned a point value based on where they score. 0 points for does not meet, all the way to 3 points for exceed expectations. Those point values translate into a rating. The rating is how we will get that excellent, good, average, or unsatisfactory rating. Okay?
When we look at academic progress, I want to point out two. Please.
How is the SC Ready test different from MAP testing?
So MAP testing is a formative assessment. It gives us checkpoints as to how well children are doing. SC Ready is a summative assessment, which it accounts for the entire year's instruction. So it's based on everything you've done this year in terms of have you mastered the state standards that we taught you all year.
So it's more specific in content?
It's very much related to the grade level.
Yeah.
So the SC Ready is a grade level assessment to determine whether the child is at, above, or below the grade level standards. MAP will go as far down or as far up as the student themselves can go.
Shall we say then that most students do better on MAP than SC Ready?
Can't say that.
No, there's really just a really strong correlation
So
between the two.
why do we have some schools that show good in MAP scores, but SC Ready scores aren't near as good?
Can you give us an example?
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be an outlier.
Yeah, when we were at the meeting at Baptist Hill, we had data, and SC Ready scores didn't look good at all for a lot of schools, but yet they look much better on the map. I don't have the data packet in front of me, but we first got it over there. Michael might have it, but that's when we first saw it.
Well, I know one thing we looked at when MAP data was the percent of students making their growth, their 1 year growth. They could still be below grade level standards, but have made that 1 year's growth.
Right.
SC Ready, is it filling their dots, or you have to know the material in order to pass it?
It's a tough
Yeah, it's pretty
test.
complex.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yes,
So wouldn't it be easier, wouldn't MAP be easier?
MAP will adjust to the student's level,
Okay, well, just to do it, that's easier then.
but the percentile associated with it depends on the difficulty of the items.
So, for example, at Moultrie, it was within 1% of accurately predicting how our students were going to perform on the math test. And I can find that out in the fall, after the fall and winter MAP test, to make any changes, adjustments, swap kids around, move schedules around. Teachers could adjust their curriculum and lesson planning to target those students. They were 3% off in 3% off in ELA, 1% off in math for 2 years in a row. So that was when the teachers saw that correlation with that, they started using the MAP results and reports more than they ever have before.
Meeting Street at Brentwood is a good example. That's in there. The Meeting Street had good MAP scores, but the second Ready scores weren't as good, as I recall.
So what would cause that?
One
Because
test
the
on
test
one
is
day
tougher.
is a snapshot for that.
Yeah.
There's
As
millions
opposed
of
to the
different-
growth test?
But the nice thing about it is you don't have to wait until spring to find out how our kids did. You can have an idea all year long going into it, rather than be surprised by it in the summer.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you're going to see the absolute performance on MAP versus the growth. So you may see good MAP data, but it's looking at the growth versus good MAP data in terms of an absolute
Are they on
sense.
the grade level?
Right, so you might see
I would also
what we say is good MAP data might just be representing good growth for that.
And so then when you've got these schools where the superintendent has said for several years, 1 year's growth is not enough, you could have a 1 year's growth, which is a good MAP because MAP expects 1 year, but if they started behind and they grew 1 year, they ended behind.
Right.
So that's where you said we've got to get certain students in certain schools to get that year and a half to get them up to the grade level they're actually attending.
Right.
Jeremy?
Okay. Two things that will clarify an academic progress. Like I said in the first slide, it's going to be based on your Algebra 1 and English 1 end of course exam performance. One thing that we do not have in the high school, because we test each subject area, math, English, science, social studies, one time throughout a student's career, you're not going to have any growth measurement at the high school level. So they're going to have each of those areas. So that part is not part of our high school accountability model whatsoever. Another big change that's coming out in this accountability model is that we're going to report out our English and algebra end of course data in our graduating cohort of students versus the prior year. Typically at the high school level, all the end of course exams that were taken this year report out, and that's what we see show up on the report card the subsequent year. And from this point forward, we'll look at a cohort of students that will go back, maybe they took that end of course exam the year before, 2 years before, in some cases 4 years before, when they were in 8th grade they took that will report out with that graduating cohort. And the scale that you're going to see to get a really mathematical value for it is going to be based on the letter grade that they performed on that end of course exam. So A being 4 points, B 3 points, C 2, D1, F0. So we're going to look at that graduating cohort and see the students' performance in each of those areas. That's where we're going to determine the value or the points that are earned by each high school.
In this end of course grading scale is the 60 is still is considered an F, which is because they changed the grading system, right?
60 a D, 59
This is
a F.
passing.
Gotcha.
Yep, so that'll be on the 10-point scale.
Gotcha.
Okay, the next category speaks to English language proficiency, and this will be the first time ever that ELL results are being reported on the state test. And so it speaks to students making annual targeted growth. So when children enter the country, if English is a second language for them, they take a test, it's called Access, and they get an initial score. For the SC Ready purposes or our state accountability purposes, they will have a number of years to meet their target growth. For example, if you entered and you tested between a 1 and a 3, you have 5 years to make up the ground you need to make up. If you scored over a 3, you will have 5 years. And so each year, we want to see students making significant progress towards reading proficiency as English language learners. Okay? The next is the school quality measure, and we talked about this earlier. It will be a survey. The State Department says it's under procurement, so all we can really do is wait on their advisement. But we've taken surveys through the State Department before, and so we can anticipate that those questions will be, in general, questions speaking to how safe do you feel in your learning environment? Do your teachers advocate on your behalf? More or less how students react and respond to the school settings that they're in.
I have a quick question, Ms. Simmons. With the definition of measure for English language proficiency, I've had several conversations with the superintendent about our potential Gullah Geechee speaking students in our system. And I know it has not been identified as a identified language at the national level, but have we ever considered, and I don't know if they'll allow us to do that, to allow students who we would potentially identify as Gullah Geechee speakers to take this language proficiency test? Because of course, being raised in Charleston, I'm acutely aware of some of the language barriers that our children are facing. And I find it so ironic that in our system, when we want children to be proficient in language, we have children in our system who we know don't speak proper English, they don't write proper English, and therefore they don't write properly in English. Therefore, I think it would make it even more difficult for them to be proficient in English. Yeah. Is it any way that we could potentially go to the state and ask for some provision or some extra measures so that we can capture students who we identify in that respect?
I know that a part of the action planning work around strategic planning, the Gullah Geechee, the dialect, if you will, is a part of action planning work, but keep in mind that this is a state system.
Yeah.
And so if I had to guess, I would say it wouldn't be an allowance, but we realize that there's a need there. But think about it, if they're saying that ELL students who don't speak English at all are being held to the standard, I would say that the argument would be children who speak English as their native language would have to have the same standards. Yeah. So I already spoke to the procurement of the survey. The next item is related to preparing for success. It speaks to our science and social studies, and in essence, it really measures students the same way they measure ELA and math. The only difference is ELA and math is going to account for 80%, and science and social studies only 10. So I think it's worth noting, if you look at the point spread, it pretty much equates the same way the math and reading does, with 0 points equaling does not meet, up to 3 points exceeding expectations. The social studies is on a slightly different scale than the science, but it all applies to that overall rating that we will get in terms of excellent, good, so on and so forth. Jeremy?
Yep. So preparing for success in the high school is, again, looking at the biology and U.S. history and, of course, exams. Calculation, the measurement is the same as it is for academic achievement, just measuring those other two content areas. So those are each worth 5% in the rating scale. The student success component, which is the one unique part from the high school, apart from middle and elementary schools, are looking at our college and career readiness. When we looked at the goal, and I think it was one of your guys' big goals as well, to look at students becoming college, career, and citizenship ready. To look at for the 17-18 school year that's going to report next year, what we're looking at is seeing the number of students, the percentage of students that are college or career ready. So we've got 9 metrics, 5 of them that indicate college readiness, 4 of them that indicate career readiness, and we're looking to see a percentage of our students achieve either college or career readiness at this point. When you look at the metrics that are there, you're looking at students that are performing at a 20 or higher composite score on the ACT, a 10, 20 or higher on the SAT, score a 3 or higher on an advanced placement exam in the area of science, math, English, social studies, and computer science, a 4 or higher in IB coursework as well, or 6 hours dual credit in English, social studies, mathematics, or computer, or STEM, excuse me.
Question, on the ACT there, why 20? I thought that 22, 23 was more what you're looking at as a predictor of success as a freshman in college.
20 is the indicator that the state came up with. There's a range, like 18 sometimes is looked at as the readiness indicator for English. 22 is the readiness indicator for mathematics. So I don't know if that's just kind of looking at an average of those ones as a 20 composite, but there are definitely other benchmarks that hit. But I think the state came up with that metric of a 20, which probably is in between that composite score. But it's different for each area. I think 23 is the area for science.
So is the
I was about to fall asleep.
No. So is the SCT on that line supposed to be ACT, or is SCT the new lingo for it?
No, that should be ACT in that very first bullet point there. Apologies.
Thank you for catching that.
The career readiness indicators are looking at our students that are completers with a state or national certification. I'm primarily looking at national certifications for those CATE completers. The state is exploring a couple options where we could utilize state certifications for that. Looking for students who score a 31 or higher on the ASVAB exam, or students who complete SC apprenticeship programs. The primary source for our career readiness indicator would be the state assessment of work keys. So achieving a silver or higher on work keys is probably going to be our most widespread area of college or career indicating success. And that's still at this point that state assessment for career readiness, which all of our third year students will take in the spring.
This slide, the next slide, is pretty much out of order, but I'll speak to it right now anyway. This just gives you a look at what the new report card, the framework, would look like. It's worth noting that the district in itself won't get an overall rating, but every individual school will. We will get, if you will, an absolute rating, if you remember the terminology from the last test, the last state test, and then we'll get individual ratings for all of the categories we just talked about: achievement, progress, student success. And so this is what it'll look like. And when it's, I think, a live document or online, you can click on it and then the report card ratings will come up. Okay?
Next couple of slides is just another way of visually showing you the breakdown of points for both schools with 20 or more ELL students and schools with fewer than 20 ELL students.
That's your cheat sheet.
It's a cheat sheet.
Yeah, that's all you're
looking at it. So they gave me the easy slides to talk about.
And if you look at that, our scores are going to be really going to run the whole range of 0 to 100. You know, we've talked about in these meetings that the community is going to be very in tune with that same idea that a 60 is a passing score and anything above that is better. But we're really going to use the whole curve or that whole 100-point range when we make these ratings. What the state is going to do when they receive the initial ratings from this school year, they're going to set what they've kind of already set up in that bar graph there, which is the top 15% of point getters across the state will receive that excellent rating as a school. Likewise, the bottom 10% will receive that unsatisfactory rating as a school. What they're going to do once they receive that that's going to give them their point ranges for each of these areas. Once they get that initial rating, they're going to fix those point values. They said for a minimum of 5 years to allow schools to catch up. So they're going to base that off of this first report card and the first point getters, and they'll turn that into what are as principals, what are going to be our goals to get from one category to the next by achieving a higher level of points in each of those areas that have been outlined.
So this is going to come out next fall for the 17-18 school year.
Yes.
So next fall, we're going to see something that looks like this. And I think I've heard this before, and I want to clarify. There's no way not to have 10% of the schools be labeled unsatisfactory.
Statewide, yes.
Statewide, because they're going to do that, so we're going to have, there's no way not to have 10% of the schools in South Carolina labeled this way. Will they immediately create that points curve so there could be possible that none of the schools fall to those point ranges? Will there be point ranges at the end of the 18-19 school year?
Yes, and at one point they were debating whether or not every year they do a bell curve, and that was an option, but they decided to use the first year as the baseline, so it gave schools for year 2 a goal, point to, let me get to this to go to the next level, or what do I have to do to maintain this level?
So if South Carolina does its job right, there could be no kids in no kids in an unsatisfactory, because it's not a bell curve anymore, it's strictly points based.
That
Okay.
would be for year 2.
But there's no way not to have that happen at the end of this year.
Right.
Somebody's in that category.
Right.
That's right.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
They'll keep raising the bar as that happens. anyways.
Graduation
So,
rate.
5 years.
Yeah.
That's me.
Thank you.
I got a clicker.
So I'm just going to very briefly go over the graduation rate. When the report cards were released on November 15th, so was the graduation rate data. So that was really the first look that we had. We had already estimated it, but that's when we knew exactly what it was. So this chart shows you from 27 all the way to 2017, so 10 years, how much our graduation rate has increased from 61.3% to 84.2% over those years. That's a 22.9 point increase. So almost every year it's grown a little bit. So we're pretty high right now. It is in fact the highest graduation rate that we've ever had. And if you look at the individual schools, we have 6 of our 14 high schools that are over 85% for their graduation rate. I wanted to point out that I've seen it in the press that some folks think that the change in the grading scale impacted the graduation rate. So that change happened last year in 16-17 when these kids were seniors. So we think it's very unlikely that there was much of an impact from that change in the grading scale. So you also in your packet have results by school and broken down by ethnicity. There you'll see that we still do have an achievement gap. That gap has decreased somewhat over the years, but it is still remains. And that's all I was going to say about grad rate. Any questions on that?
So you have a breakdown?
Yeah.
Just from 17.
I think in your packet somewhere.
This is 17.
Yeah, 17.
Can you get us, since the information that you provided for the on-time for your graduate is a 10-year shot, can you also send it to us electronically, a 10-year graduation rate by school and ethnicity too?
Yeah, I looked for that. I didn't have that handy, so I can prepare that. I don't have it ready, but I can prepare it, yes. You mean overall? Okay.
And then once we get that, then I'll ask some more stuff. Yeah, that'll be,
Okay.
that's a good snapshot of.
I do have one question.
He asked for the 10
still have
years
one.
by
I'll tell you, over 10 years, from Mr. Miller.
Cindy's disturbing.
Sorry.
Between 2008 and 2017, I didn't do 2007, African Americans improved by 3 points and Hispanics improved by 10 points.
Hispanics by 10?
by 10. Now, we can back that up. Laura will back it up
Yeah.
to 2007 for you.
Well, I did it overall, and that's why I was able to say that the gaps have declined over the years.
Right.
That in I did 2008 as well.
Yeah.
There was something funny about the 2007 numbers. I don't think I have those. But in 2008, there was a 18.6 point gap to black and white students, and that is now at 15.6 points. So that has gone down.
Is that all subjects or?
That's for the grad rate.
Graduation.
Four-year
Graduation
graduation rate, right.
Because then my next question then would be, if the gap has reduced by some small points, my next question is how? How did we do it? What did we do? What happened in those schools that created even if the small integer of a spike in grad rate, what was done differently so that we can attest or point to as to why?
We need to have our next meeting at St. John's then.
You know, because I don't like, I can't say I don't like, I would prefer the conversations be centered around the graduation rate over the last 10 years has increased by 20-something points, and this is why it's increased.
Right.
Right? Because just to say it increased is one thing, but boiling it down and really finding out exactly what was being done differently at Burke, North Charleston, Stall, Baptist Hill, St. John's, to get a 3% increase in African American students' graduation rate and 10% of Hispanic students.
And St. John's is 10% above the district average for African American students.
So
We need to go to St. John's and find out what they're doing.
Some of it is better record keeping. I mean, we have gotten much better at that.
And Mr. Miller, you asked a question a little bit ago that we'll go back and research, but you asked whether the end of course cut scores were impacted by the change in the uniform grading scale. And I don't think so. I don't think the end of course assessment goes on a uniform grading scale. I think that cut score is set by the state, and they were renorming that cut score because our tests were too easy compared to the national assessment of educational progress, NAEP. We were showing that more of our students were passing than the NAEP test made it look. NAEP does randomized sampling in every state. So I'm pretty sure that the end of course test cut score is not impacted by the uniform grading scale, but we'll double check that.
Okay, because I know as I learn more and more about data and numbers and test scores, there's always, like you guys were saying earlier, there's a correlation between how and what a student can do in math, and there's some kind of indicator of how well they may do in SC Ready. And so I was having a conversation with a friend of mine whose child attends a local private school. And he was basically saying that in his daughter's class, if she takes a test and let's say she doesn't do as well as she'd like, they allow her to take the test again. But when she takes the test the second time, whatever her score is the second time is the score that they record. And so he was talking about how well the students do at the school. They got a high graduation rate. So then my question was, well then, how well are the students doing on the SAT? How well are they doing on the ACT test? And they're not doing as well. And I said, well, because there's always going to be a correlation. You can't do really well. If your grad rate is really high, then your other test scores that are associated with that should be high as well, Todd. And if they're not, well, then it's something we need to take a look at. So as I look at data like this, I want to know, how are our students doing? How did they do at, let's say, Baptist Hill or the EEOs with the EOC? How'd they do? When they came into Baptist Hill as a 9th grader, how many students were reading on grade level? How many students were, 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade? And when they came in, what intervention did we provide them and provide the school to the student so that student, when they took the EOC, did they pass it the first time? Did they take it multiple times? I think those things are the kind of things I think we need to understand if we're really going to be poignant about making children career, college, and citizenship ready.
So are private schools allowed to do that, to do multiple EOCs and then pick the one that counts? Or
do they take
don't do
EOC?
state
No, I
mandated
think he
EOC.
was talking about classroom assessments. not-
okay, because
classrooms.
are they mandated to do the same state? They don't have to do any of the stuff we do. God, that sucks.
Okay, any more questions on
Because they're not played by the same set of standards.
graduation rate? Reverend Collins?
Yes, with the new grade configuration, and 60 means the D being passing down 60. So if a student, a senior's average, cumulative high school average is 60, they're still graduate now?
Well, you have
Cumulative
an
average,
EOC score. An EOC score of D or higher is considered passing.
I'm sorry.
A EOC and a course score of D or higher would be considered passing that. And it counts for 20% of the grade for that class.
No, what I'm asking is, if a child's GPA is 60,
Oh, the
60,
GPA.
does that senior graduate still under this new formula?
So they've met the 24 credits and have their
Yeah.
necessary.
They made it
they would.
60 in each one.
They got the Carnegie credits,
Yes,
yeah.
if they
Yeah,
go.
everything is
A
60.
D in every class,
Yes.
they're gonna graduate.
The
Todd, they
ranking in
might
that
not be
class
college
would be
ready.
pretty low.
And they might not be career
No,
ready.
but is the college going to have that student that made it 60?
No, that's why it's kind of weird that they're upping the standard to make sure kids are college and career ready, and then lowering the standard to get out of a class necessary to prepare you to be college or career ready.
So, but lastly, Michael speaking about the graduation rate, numbers increasing for African American students, but what about the basic courses, the science, math, and reading or English? Those numbers were broadening the last time we checked over the past few years. Is that still the case?
What do you mean?
Just the gap between white children and black children, the gap was a little bit wide, kind of wide. So look at what was spreading.
In terms of
Math,
the end of
science,
score,
and reading.
the end of score grade.
Oh, I thought the end of course scores had actually, the gap had declined over the years.
Well, we didn't check again. The last I looked, there was quite a gap. In fact, the Hispanic children were doing better. But they were doing better than African American
Well, it was
children.
the same with grad rate. Their grad rate was higher as well.
Yeah, but also you don't have the current like 15 or 14 or 16.
We don't have that.
I think those numbers. I think that's where they saw it at. On the more recent numbers, like the numbers are much higher. I want to say 20 something points difference. I think between white and black children in science and math.
Can we?
At least 20 are better.
Can we get that in the Friday update so that we're not walking around wondering what that was? So the end of course.
We got it somewhere already, but I don't know
Chris is
exactly what's
referencing some document that you've produced. Can we try to find out what he's looking at? Because I want to make sure that we don't walk around with the wrong information based on what's said here.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
Thank you. Any
I
other
think
questions?
it's 23%, I think.
Okay, targeted support, update, and coaching.
We have
Like you probably got that much other stuff.
I probably got it, because I keep all my data.
I'll start it off. I'm pinch hitting for Cindy Ambrose, who's really ill today. So
This is what I was looking for earlier.
you don't have these slides. Can everyone see the screen? Not really, barely.
Yeah, 2016.
Do you have them?
I want to see the 2017. That's what James gave us.
Well, great. That's great. So does everyone have that packet?
But what is the packet?
It looks like what's on the screen. So Cindy wanted us to start with this quote from Karen Chenoweth, who is working with us. Karen Chenoweth, about 10 years ago, wrote a book called It's Being Done. She studied schools where students of color and poverty are achieving at high levels. And that set her off on research that she has continued since. So she has agreed to work with Charleston County Schools. She's agreed to hold a convening here. Cindy's had a couple of phone calls with her. But we like this quote from Karen. It never fails to amaze me. I walk into school because of a bunch of numbers, and inside I find passionate, knowledgeable, skillful educators who believe their students are capable of great things. So Cindy's admonition to us today is to get beyond the numbers and get to what is happening to make that difference. It's the systems and processes that we put in place, using the data to guide those discussions and the decisions. So data, systems, processes build the culture. It doesn't happen the other way around. You don't try to build a happy culture and then get to systems, processes, and data. You use the data to build the systems and processes that over time create a culture of continuous improvement focused on achievement for all children. Michelle?
So, as we build out the theory of action that details the gears, as you see the learning service leverage gears, these are some of our interventions that we've put in place to address those areas of need, such as target support, PADEP, which is the principal's evaluation system, the data teams, the PLCs, and the meeting structures, and the coaches. So, and I'll start with actually the data teams. So this year, for the first time, we have the Learning Service Division have come together and broken into various teams to look at our data. We went into a deep dive into data across the district in every academic piece that we can look at. Math, social studies, early childhood, everything, poverty. What's happening within our schools as a whole across the board. We also look at, we put in targeted support. So we identified 10 schools who we said we would address hard. We would go into the schools as a team, meet with the principal shoulder to shoulder, and let's look at data. What's happening in your building? How can we help you? Where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? We also set our meeting structures, our principals' meetings, our leadership team and learning services meeting is focused on data. What is going on in the district? Where are our weaknesses? Where are our strengths? Again, so we're focusing on our core focus is on student achievement, our weaknesses, our strengths, and also leadership. How are we performing as a group, and how are we supporting and helping our schools? We're also looking at coaching. We're looking at our current coaching structure that we have in our district. You know, we receive coaches from the State Department. Title I pays for coaches, the district pays for coaches. Well, what are they doing actually in the classroom? How are they helping the teachers shoulder to shoulder? So we would like to make that more coherent and bringing that together within the district under district leadership and provide training and assistance so that when they do deploy into the schools, they are helping in a universal, structured way, in a meaningful way, because these are the people that most teachers respect. These are our esteemed educators. And I kind of went on through my schedule. So those were the two areas that I was talking about, the coaches and the targeted support. Yes.
I am up next. So the gears that Learning Services is trying to put together to use are based on Karen Chenoweth's work. And that work is outlined in front of you. They focus closely on what students need to learn. They collaborated on how to teach it. They assess frequently to see if students had learned. They use data to find the patterns over instruction. And they built relationships. But they didn't start by trying to build relationships. They started confronting the data and having fierce conversations. Fierce conversations don't mean that they're impolite or that they're brutal, but they're courageous, and you confront the facts, not confront one another, in building relationships that make it clear that we're here to work together to support kids. We don't have to necessarily like one another, but we do have to work together. That's true around this board and this board table, and it's true at every school. And that's what we're trying to focus on. Let's remove personalities and really put the children in the center of the conversation and talk about what is working and confront what is not working.
Okay. And so I kind of talked about the targeted support on, yes.
May I ask just one question? And when confronting where it's not working, y'all dig down into the classroom level?
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right.
And that's what I'm getting ready to go right now.
Okay, excuse me.
So when we talked about phase one work, when we worked in the targeted supports, when the teams we went to the schools to work with the principal, the leadership teams and the staff to dig down into the classrooms and look at the data, what's working, what's not working, how can we help you as a team. And they're going to talk about that process in a second. So we were putting that process in place so that we could provide the support that the schools need from the district office, so that we can show that we are a team and we are being supportive and helpful. And as you know, the 12 targeted schools that we are visiting, we visit first semester of phase one, and then the second semester we'll be visiting some more teams as well. But the schools are identified as Burns, Shakur, Ryerson, James Simmons, Medford, Mamager, Sanders Clyde, Northwoods, Morningside, Simmons, Pinckney, Burns, and North Charleston High School.
Can you do that again a little bit slower?
Yes. Burns Elementary, Shakur Elementary, Ryerson, James Simmons, Mary Ford, Meminger, Sanders Clyde, Northwoods Middle School, Morningside Middle School, Simmons Pinckney, Burke High School, and North Charleston High School.
One more time.
So, and then the thing is,
Did anybody get all of them?
I don't think
Pass it
so.
over.
You can read my chicken scratch.
She got it, okay. So, and so the phase two, as we went in and worked with the principals and shared information, the conversation two-way, we also came back with some recommendations to lead with the leadership team, and again, they will talk about this process. And the phase two work, again, we will go back in to reflect, refine, and again, approach the same schools to see how far have we come in supporting and making gains in student progress.
So that was going to go to my question. So the coaching component is from the offspring of the targeted schools that you just listed?
The coaching component is already in place that we have. The targeted support, yes, that has come out of part of our data team, and when we looked at, we have coaches in place, and what exactly are they doing, and how are they helping? So we decided that that's an area that we need to find and deploy more in a succinct, coordinated way.
But the coaching, though, piece is with those schools that you listed?
Yes,
Or?
that is a coaching component, I apologize, yes, that is a coaching component, yes. Okay?
I'm on. Explained our slide, put our little picture up there. There we go. Well, I was one of the first schools they visited for this round of support.
We recognize that
And,
office.
It was an exciting day for us. We are focused totally on the child and making all decisions based on children, not adults. And the first thing I want to talk about is building and cultivating and maintaining a culture and climate of care, respect, compassion for all children and families. And we do this by creating systems that have to be in place for every group of folks in the school, so we're all on the same accord. And yes, it takes courageous conversations. I read Karen Chenoweth also, and every time I check myself by going back into her book to see what it is that we're doing and are we following the right track. And the piece that I want to just clearly communicate is we have to be consistent, and we have to have a clear communication plan for everyone so they all know what's happening in the school. So I've done a courier for over 25 years as a building principal, and I've been sent to many schools. So everybody from the cafeteria staff to my day porter to office volunteers, even the reading people, know exactly what is happening in the school at all times. Otherwise, we can't respect each other, our time, meetings that have to take place, so we have to know that. And then the second piece is the courageous conversations with communities of practice. And what we have is we've started to call PLCs, communities of practice. That's the newest word of the federal legislation. And because I'm part of a collective leadership grant that we have at the district, it's matching adults that are at the school already that we felt viable, that should stay and be part of our school, and groom them to excellence. And then we have our new teachers coming in. It's a collaborative, really highway of them working together so we get the best results. And it's really focusing on their talents and respecting that. The second area is maximizing instructional minutes for improvement of academic performance. We don't take children out of classrooms. We have a schedule that's fixed. I've shared with the teachers what we teach when and why it's consistently better in that order, even though they'll write to me sometimes and say, Ms. Conway, can we change? I'll say, no, it's non-negotiable. And so you have to have some non-negotiables. When you're not doing well, then there's some things you just can't leave wiggle room for. When things are wobbly, then we get back together and look at our data. Our MTSS team is probably one of the strongest I've been a part of starting last year, that we really look at all students. We have names up on the board. We're looking to see how many referrals they have they decreased, what do we have in place, who's in our breakfast club, why is that best, and we make sure that we really put the child first to make sure it's good for them. If it's not good for them, then we're not doing what's right. If I see that student too much and I notice them, then we have not served them well. When I don't notice the child, that means they're learning, they're in class, and everything is going well. And that's really, I just said that to 2 children this morning. Again, the scheduling is critical. Everybody was a little bit nervous when I first made this change this year, but everyone says they like it better because they don't feel like they're getting grumpy teachers, somebody rolling their eyes, not knowing when they're taking them, no, they can't come. So now all services are being delivered whether it's after school, during lunchtime, but not during instructional minutes. So we can't say they're not being taught. And then the third thing is acquiring and developing teacher talent, bridging collective leadership for quality human capital. And I just so believe this, that we are there to groom with a coaching model. If we're not shoulder to shoulder with the teachers, and we have 4 coaches that I have in my school, and then I have teacher effectiveness coach, and I also have communities in school, all are counseling, so they all have counseling degrees behind it, so it really supports my guidance team. So we have, again, a continuum of care of adults that really support. So if I really schedule it carefully, every teacher, even though we don't have 2 teachers in our room, we have an extra adult in every room all day long, and that's what's key. You have to just schedule it well so that you make sure you have that support. The other piece is we don't make excuses at our school. We just don't admire any problems. It takes a lot of energy and a waste of time to stay on something and not move forward. So we just really build a climate that really is moving this way. We want to make leaps and bounds to get our students where they need to be. Thank you.
Good evening to everyone who I have not spoken to. How you doing? Speaking from Burns Elementary, when the targeted team came in to visit our school, it was pretty much a listening session. They were listening to us to understand the school, understand what we were doing in the building, and we had 3 focus to come out. One, the first one was building capacity in the teachers that we have, and hiring teachers. We have both some experienced teachers and new teachers to CCSD and also new to the profession. And a part of doing that is making sure all the teachers in the building understand what curriculum, what the expectation is, what the expectation for students, what the expectation for the planning, and also what the expectation for parents when parents come to visit the school. Secondly, what we're looking at is building partnership with our parents, inviting our parents in, making sure every classroom has a room parent. Also communicating to the parents exactly what's happening in the school, sharing the school data, sharing the MAP data, sharing how we handle discipline, how we handle MAP scores. And it was amazing. First time we showed our MAP scores to our parents, which was 2 months ago, was the first time they've ever seen it from the time they had a child enter the school. So that's a big eye opener for them, for our parents. And the final thing that we're looking at improving upon is the co-teaching model. Some people say, oh, the co-teaching model, it'll work. It's kind of like an arranged marriage. You just can't put 2 people together and expect it to work.
You can't?
No. Really not. So for us, it is ongoing. It is looking at our teacher personalities, looking at how the best they plan together. If they don't plan together, they can't deliver the lesson together. So we're carefully looking at how our teachers planning the lesson and delivering the instruction, all a part of it. And with that, we hope that with everyone's participation and focusing on these 3 things that we are going to see some improvement at Burns Elementary.
Okay, as you heard, these are a lot of strategies that the principals have implemented at the school level, shoulder to shoulder with the teachers, coaching, and it's not a gotcha. It's district level is working with the school level, shoulder to shoulder, to determine where our areas of needs are for growth and support.
Thank you very much.
I was just on the gotcha comment. Like, has the reception been welcoming? Not at y'all's school, but you wouldn't be here if it wasn't. Yeah.
They could have been told. They could have been told you were short.
You are not invited.
But are people like, oh, you're here to put paperwork to get me fired?
No, right. No, it has been very receptive of the principals, and I think Joe and Dr. Williams and Mr. Wilson and can attest.
Yeah, they've been very receptive and glad we're there. And the fact that we went in and listened and then went and visited classes and observed what was going on demonstrated that we weren't there to get anybody. We were there to hear, see what's going on, and then provide some feedback and support.
Okay, nice.
I think if Jarita's point is taken as they move forward and they go to schools, if you go to a school and your concern is the children and not you're a bad person, I think the information can be received in love, because it's about the fact that we have to love the students enough to recognize where they are and where they aren't, and how to get them to where they need to be. And so I appreciate the leadership that the two of you guys have shown at your respective schools. It does not happen overnight. It does take time. I'm hoping that we will give you the time it's needed to do the much needed work at Mary Ford and the much needed work at Burns, because constant change in leadership makes all of this erroneous. It doesn't even work. So.
And that's a good point. I'm glad you said it does take time, and that's what we're asking for the time to do this. Just take us some time.
Thank you so much. This is really valuable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you, Dad.
Mathematics pathways, Tri-County Cradle to Career.
Anytime, Dad.
This is a large team.
I want that up.
Keep moving. That's all my space, man. I got space.
Hello. I wish I could convince them to build a CAS back there, but ain't nobody here to talk about it. Actually, I got didn't they buy something that John Reed?
Ms. Jeffries.
Hi.
John Reed, thanks for having us. I'm going to introduce my colleague Jeff Schuler in a minute, but I want to first tell you what the Math Pathways Project team is, and then what it has done. 4 years ago, the college presidents of 9 universities established the Post-Secondary Education Consortium, which is one of 4 such groups that Cradle to Career convenes in this region. And as all of them do, they follow a defined and rigorous process to understand the metrics that attach to attainment from cradle to career, and then dive into project work that seems to have the potential to move the needle. So that, for example, the Kindergarten Readiness Network, another of ours, is responsible for bringing the Reading by Third project to agreement amongst the 4 school districts, and is now funded by the Trident United Way and at work in the district. The High School Graduation Network has a project to increase FAFSA completion in all 4 districts. And last year we ran a pilot. We doubled, actually the schools doubled the number of FAFSA completions with support from us, and we're now scaling that project across the region. The Low Country Education Consortium is nothing more than the 4 school superintendents meeting together as a group, and we worked with them on the Reading by Third, and we're working with them now on a joint initiative around principal development. So the Math Pathways project team is an example of another project area that we support. 2 years ago, a team of college professors and the math specialists from the 4 school districts began meeting on the basis, and this was President Bastidi's idea, on the basis that high school graduates need to be more ready for college math, and colleges need to be much more ready to receive the graduates that they get. So a joint effort was to be more than just hammering away at the districts to get better. Since that began, Jeff Schuler, to my left, who is a retired executive from Boeing, has been leading that group in a way that has caused a lot of progress, and that the math professionals seem to enjoy. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and have him speak to you about the recommendations that they have made, some which are quite specific to the strategic planning of the board.
Thanks, John. Again, my name's Jeff Schuler. I'm a retired Boeing executive. I've been here since day one of Boeing in 2009, and I retired in 2013 and then again in 14. They asked me to come back for about 9 months after I retired to help further that effort. But John and others asked me to be a part of this team. I'm always focused from the standpoint of we want our future workforce to have the skills capable, particularly in those STEM-related fields as it relates to math, to be ready for those jobs we have a need for across this region and all the companies that are here today and may come in the future. And so we've, as John said, the colleges in the state and the 4 school districts locally, we've been meeting for a couple years now. Your representative for Charleston County School District is Kathy Demers. You know Kathy. She's been a great participant and has provided a lot of input and action into this whole effort that we've been working on for this last couple of years. And there's 4 major initiatives that we've been working and implementing as it relates to this program. And I'll try to quickly go through each one of those and give you a status. Some are up for review and hopefully implementation. Others have already been implemented. The first one that I wanted to talk about today is one, I know we've released this proposal, and I believe it's in your hands, at least some of you or all of you have seen this, but that is, this team strongly believes that we need to have math curriculum for every year of high school. Students take a math course in every year of high school, and that there be end-of-course exam requirements consistent, let's say for the Charleston School District, for those courses. The first piece of that is that all students should complete 4 credits of math in high school, including Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, and a 4th higher level math course beyond Algebra 2. So that's the first recommendation and proposal that we have. The second one is that all students should enroll in and complete a math course in each year of high school. Students who complete required math credits prior to 9th grade may receive graduation credit for that coursework. However, these students should still enroll in and complete a math course during each high school year. The main driver of this is several of the students today complete their requirements ahead of graduation at the end of the senior year. And there's a gap that's created between that time that they complete those courses and when they either 1, begin their career, or 2, they enroll in either a 2-year or a 4-year college or university. And during that period of time where there is a gap, we have seen and they are seeing difficulties in retention of those math skills, and when they go to those colleges or universities, or they go into their careers, there's difficulty in the case of the colleges and universities passing the placement exams in those institutions. So that's the second piece of that recommendation. The third is students planning on pursuing a STEM-related career should take an algebra-based course, preferably pre-calculus, as their 4th level math course. And if pre-calculus is completed prior to senior year, students should enroll in and complete an additional algebra-based course. And then the last piece of that first recommendation, the proposal, is that high school math courses beyond Algebra 1, and I believe there's already a consistent exam course, end of course exam for Algebra 1, but beyond Algebra 1 should include a final course exam that is a common across the district, and in this case, the Charleston County School District, and it is aligned exclusively to the set of priority standards that are set for that course. So we're looking for a consistent exam, end of course exam, across the school district.
For each of the math courses, or?
Yes, correct. Algebra 1, I understand, is in place today, and we need the others.
Is that something we can purchase off the shelf, or is that something we have to develop?
Or just execute?
You can actually, the math teachers in Berkeley County created their own.
Okay.
The importance of having it and having it tied to state standards versus what an individual school or teacher might have taught in that course is the driver.
Okay, yeah.
Reverend Collins, did you have a question?
I'm sorry.
Reverend Collins.
Yes, I do agree that we need the math courses every year, and preferably more than just one per year. But the problem I'm finding also is that two things. We're not teaching enough math in middle school, And when the kids get to high school and they see algebra or pre-algebra or foundational algebra, they start off struggling right away because we waited so late in their career to expose it. And now we got a few middle schools and magnet schools teach algebra in middle school, and those kids get a far greater advantage than our kids in traditional schools. And so we wait too late to start teaching math, is what I'm trying to say. And we have to do better than that. We can't wait till 9th and 10th grade to start teaching math and say you need this to graduate. And they haven't had no experience in algebra whatsoever, no experience in geometry, very little. So we need the proposal you have, but we also need to go back and backtrack. Let's get on the table earlier, like other kids are doing. And I don't know why we have it in some schools. I don't know, but most of the Northwestern schools don't have it. And our middle schools don't really have it.
I would say in the next couple.
Are you saying that they don't have Algebra 1?
Right, they're not teaching our middle schools. And the magnet SOA has it.
No, they
has
have
algebra, but we don't have enough algebra to get the kids' feet wet, where they can come to high school prepared to take algebra and algebra 2 and move on to geometry.
Can somebody tell us what middle schools have and do not have Algebra 1 real quick?
Northwoods has Algebra 1.
Are the teachers
Morningside have, yes they are.
We need to see those grades.
Algebra 1.
I'm sorry.
And also Zipper has Algebra 1 in North
Is it Algebra
Can
1
we,
or
I'm sorry.
foundations of algebra?
Can you finish the list?
Can we get the list without somebody
Yeah,
talking
unless-
over you? What schools in North Charleston teach Algebra 1?
Northwoods has Algebra 1. Morningside has Algebra 1, and also Zipper does have Algebra 1 as well.
What about West Ashley?
Yes, they do.
So we've
Do we
got.
have any middle schools that don't teach it? Don't offer it?
St. James Santee, as of right now, does not, because they did not have a teacher, and they just got a math teacher. But we are looking at a plan for St. James Santee and Simmons Pinckney to offer Algebra 1 second semester, and we're looking at that seat time because that's a requirement for them to have that Algebra 1.
So St. James Santee and Simmons Pinckney are the two middle schools that do not have Algebra 1 today.
Yes.
All the other ones are teaching Algebra 1 today.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right, so let's back a little further. Okay, so you say it is at Northwestern Middle Schools, right?
Yes.
All of them?
Yes.
All right, so to what extent is it being taught? And do you have any numbers to show us anything?
What do you mean by numbers?
How students are doing with it?
They're doing pretty good. Actually, when you look at the ELC scores for those scholars that take the Algebra 1 in middle school, be it in East Cooper schools or North Charleston schools, they're scoring, almost at, at least above an 85% pass rate on the ELC.
Is it certain students taking it or the whole school taking it?
Well, yes, sir.
Certain students? So again, back to my point, so the whole general population is not taking Algebra 1 then? Only the students that choose that. And the point I'm getting at is really the whole middle schools completely need to take Algebra 1. Not a class here or there, but they all need to be taking it.
Up until now, that's been a high school class.
It is, yeah.
So what's happening is we discovered that they're not performing well in high school at math.
I
But
think
the math is on.
That's a different question.
Whenever you're like ready.
I think Reverend Collins, there's a legitimate question about the readiness of 8th graders or 9th graders or 10th graders to take algebra. And Jeff is going to talk about Algebra Nation, which is now.
Yeah, but I heard good things about that.
Algebra Nation has an on-ramp.
Yeah.
And that on-ramp is designed for people who just aren't quite ready to step into Algebra 1. And it demonstrates first that there's a lot of need for that.
Right.
And our evidence says middle grades math needs a great deal of attention. I think the summative test results and the MAP scores say the same. That's kind of next on our list, but maybe you can touch on Algebra Nation. I will touch not only on hopefully the middle school, but we need to get back into the K through 4 or 5 grades too.
That's what.
Okay, so
Can I ask for my last question? I'll be done. If you could get for us the number of students in District 4 and any other place, any other elements one also, the number of students taking Algebra 1 in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, and
don't have it in
progress.
6th, but 7th and 8th.
So you offer it in 7th and 8th. So you can give us the number of students actually taking it. And that's what and then the number of students in those schools. I would really like to see that. I'm done.
Okay.
So, just to ask some clarifying questions, I was going to get to Algebra Nation. Obviously, we've had that in place how long now?
About a year, isn't it?
Well, it started this year.
We implemented Algebra Nation in 17-18 school year. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. But that I was going to ask, and Reverend Collins is correct, this board has said we want algebra in the 8th grade levels. So how can you align your suggestions to assume, and maybe this is where you need to come and talk to the board, but assume Algebra 2 is the lowest level algebra that a high schooler needs. If, as Reverend Collins is saying, he wants every 8th grader to take Algebra 1, so help us figure that out. Reverend Collins is saying it as if students not taking Algebra 1 in the 8th grade is something we are withholding from students and hurting them. On the other side of the coin, we know that there are high schools in our district that if you haven't had Algebra 1 at the end of the 8th grade, you either can't get in or you are not set up for success.
There's one high school.
Well, but I'm not saying that, Chris. As much as I'm saying is, imagine if you were behind in math and walked into Wando.
Take Algebra 1 again.
Right. Or you take it for the first time.
Precisely. So do we want to be algebra ready after every kid leaves the 8th grade? Do we want to make it a mandatory for all 8th graders? How does that fit in? And that's where I want to hear the conversation, because Reverend Collins is indicating that we're doing something negative to the kids if we don't make sure they all take Algebra 1 by the end of the 8th grade. Where does algebra fit into the scheme of getting ready for high school?
Can we turn it back to the presenters?
Well, that's exactly my point. So why is Algebra 1 your recommendation when this board has said Algebra 1 should be offered in the 8th grade?
It's not. Our recommendation is that a math course be taken, not ours, but theirs.
Right.
Each year of high school. If they take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, then they take Algebra 2, pre-calc, stats, whatever math courses are, geometry.
If they don't take Algebra 1 in the 8th grade, in your pathways, can students still successfully get through high school, into college and career by starting algebra in the high school?
Our team has not specifically said we must take Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Okay, they say we must take a course.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Try again.
The team that has been working this has not said we've got to take and complete Algebra 1 in the 8th grade. They say we've got to take a math course in the 4 years of high school. So
this board has said we have to have, because I'm going back to past board directives.
We have to offer it, but not every child.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Take Algebra 1.
Well, that's what I'm trying to ask.
Academic issue.
That's what I'm trying to ask. So Reverend Collins, are you okay that there's a large number of students who won't take Algebra 1 in the 8th grade? See, I wanted y'all to hear what he's.
Might not be ready.
But wait a minute, Priscilla. I just wanted you to hear what the expectation of certain board members is. And while we have all the experts at the table talk about that.
Priscilla, well, the point I'm making is this. I don't have it in front of me, but again, we had the data sheets, and the African American students were doing horrible in math across Charleston County. I mean, low numbers. Todd knows better than I do. Very low numbers behind all the other ethnic groups. African Americans and poor kids, and Spanish kids are doing a little better, but still not near good enough. We are way behind in math, and this is why it's important to me that these kids get a head start on this math to get caught up, so they can have an advantage. They can get exposed to it. Once they get exposed to math and algebra and geometry, they can function then. But late in high school, when they got the football and the basketball and the cheerleaders and the friends and peer pressure, it's hard to be dedicated to start learning math.
I absolutely agree with you, but if you've worked in a school, kids are at all different levels.
Sure they are.
And you can stick a kid in an Algebra 1 class because you think it's a great idea, but they'll fail if they're not prepared because they haven't completed whatever they needed to complete to get there.
They're better to fail in middle school than
when you look
high.
at individual students, and I'm race aside, you've got to provide a proper education for each one of those students according to what level they're on. And yes, push them ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we finish here?
Yes,
the
all right.
presentation? Then we can ask questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you would, let's move on to the second area, which is Algebra Nation. And as we said, we started that program. There was a proposal that came out of the Math Pathways project team. It has since been implemented across the whole state of South Carolina now, and I believe most all the counties are now implementing Algebra Nation. I believe that, in fact, at the time that we were looking at this, 60 to 86 districts had put this in place, and I think it's even gotten larger since then. But the state had chosen 3 South Carolina districts for intensive professional development, with the teachers, and in Charleston County being one, there was actually 3 high schools, North Charleston, Burke, and Stall High Schools that were receiving and have received intensive implementation and support for this program. And there was a pep rally here about 3 weeks ago, I believe, and those of you that were able to attend, it was just, I was amazed. Because Kim, I was principal for the day for 2 years here while you were principal here. We talked about this high school and some of the challenges here, but it was amazing to see the students in this auditorium who were excited about this implementation. They were energized, and the people they brought into town who are on videos of this teaching this course, they brought them up on stage, and they were like rock stars, these kids in this school. They are, it really appears like this program is taking off in Charleston County, and it's, right now that Algebra Nation is teaching the Algebra 1 course. And we have a further recommendation that we've taken forward to the Lastinger Institute to implement and move on from the Algebra 1 implementation, continue to do that, grow that, but we're also wanting to see a Spanish version of those Algebra Nation videos that we can use here in Charleston School District and the region, and also for them to develop additional math subjects such as Algebra 2, Geometry, and Pre-Calculus, and they're off working that now. And to speak to the questions about middle school, we also have put a recommendation to that Lastinger Institute to begin to, and asking them to look at middle schools and putting a math program in place for middle schools. They've not, they're not wanting to get too far into this implementation and then go off into some areas. They want us to get this in place, but they will look at the middle schools and seeing if there's a program that they can develop for the middle school grades. So that's the recommendations, where we are in Algebra Nation here in Charleston School District, and some recommendations we put forth. Some are being worked and some others are still being looked at by that institution. John, did you want to add anything there?
No.
Okay.
Thank you very
I think I'd say that the measure of Algebra Nation's effectiveness is going to be, you'll get a little bit of a look in EOCs in December, but the real measure is going to be year-end and EOCs and then SC Ready.
Mr. Miller.
So, when I hear the concern of students being able, the gap, if students complete their 4 Carnegie units of math prior to graduating from high school, that there's a gap when they go into college readiness, taking the aptitude tests, and so on and so forth. So I was asking Kim while you guys were talking, excuse me for being rude, but I was trying to figure out who sets the, what's the word I'm looking for?
How it's taught, whether it's a semester or
Right,
a
whether
year-long.
it's a semester or year-long course. If we set that, then the question that I have is, are we as a district going to look at, instead of having math taken in a semester where a kid could take 4 Carnegie units basically in 2 years or in a year, having, when we were in school, I took Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry
August to June.
for the whole year. Is that something that we're going to look at possibly doing district-wide, or would we still allow schools to set their own standard when it comes to, a 4x4 schedule, 8A and B-Day?
That's a good question. I like that. That's cool. Yeah.
Go ahead, yes.
Just based on my experience, having a 4x4 schedule allows more flexibility and allows students to, a student who really excels in math, to take more math and accelerate all the way through not only AB calculus, but BC calculus, and go on up through and then take in dual enrollment and all that. It also allows those students who just want to take one math each year, do that, but also incorporate things like pre-engineering, some of those science courses, more elective units. It also allows fine arts programs to be built in that. So a modified 4x4 schedule, which has year-long courses, quarter courses, semester courses, all the different types, allows a lot more flexibility versus having an all-year course. When you're in an all-year course,
You sign up for 7 courses at the beginning of the school year, and you take them all the way through, like the majority of us do.
So then how does that flexibility really help students from the studies that you guys have done as it pertains to a particular gap, or students taking, because not every student, to Priscilla's point, will be taking Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry. They may be taking a different set of math classes. So if the goal is to prepare children for careers beyond high school where they need to be stronger and math focused, having a schedule that allows for flexibility is one thing, Todd. But if the children that we're seeing that you've identified are not particularly ready for college because of that same flexibility, then is the flexibility at some point hurting the students, not necessarily supporting them in the way that we intend?
Well, I think at some point you have to start looking at your individual district's math pathways, Michael, which means that if a scholar has maxed out on math, traditionally what we figure in our mind is once they're done with like that Algebra 1, that Algebra 2, that geometry, and they have taken that pre-calculus, we have to start looking at different maths like vectors and different things of that nature. And that's a math pathways issue that we have to address within the district and look at once you get those kids that, according to that schedule, that 4x4 that gives them that flexibility, once they've maxed out on that math, what are some other offerings we can provide to them? And that's part of what we would propose to support this initiative, is looking at our math pathways and saying, okay, we know we're going to have scholars that have gotten to that point, so now what do we have to offer them? And it may also be looking at our virtual school offerings as well and beefing that up, because we know we're going to have scholars that fit in that mold, and we're going to have to offer them something else. And that's a math pathways CCSD issue that we have to look at.
Are these recommendations going to be implemented by the district, or do they require policy action on our part? Or?
Most of them can be implemented without any policy action. It's a matter of budget and finding the talented teachers, which is the second part of the strategy. They don't require a board vote.
Okay.
And I wanted to bring some clarity, just like the gentleman said earlier. We don't have Algebra Nation at the middle school level. We have it at the high school level because, going back to also what Priscilla said, you have to look at the levels of where kids are. Just placing the kids in algebra doesn't mean that they're going to be successful, because if they're not successful, they're going to have to take it again in 9th grade anyway. You have scholars that we look at their skill set, we look at where they are.
And they get a 0 on that GPA that counts for graduation.
Exactly.
Right.
So then we look at those kids that we know are ready, and we said, this child is ready for Algebra 1, so we're going to place them in there. So those will be the kids that will fall into that category that I just spoke about, that we need to think of some more pathways for them, because they're going to max out on their math, and we want them to have 4 years of math, through high school. So just to let you know, traditionally scholars do not take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, but we do have that offering for those scholars that are ready for it.
But we also, on the other side of that, those kids who are not ready for Algebra 1 going into the 9th grade, we can double up their math in the first year. Right. And so they're taking math all year long. They're just taking two different courses in math.
And I would take from what Michael said, I would have a little bit more flexibility than to say a hard and fast. You must take one math class every year for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, because you are going to have kids who blow right past it, and you are going to have the kids who are taking the 2 in 1 year. Maybe they're more interested in doing engineering, and that was a prerequisite that had to get out of the way.
And that's a part of the pathway. That's math.
Right. Yes, I would allow some flexibility.
That's a good deal. Just as a footnote, Algebra Nation is accessible for anybody on Power School, including 8th graders who may opt into Algebra 1. And for those who may not be ready for Algebra 1, they can access, it's a voluntary online program. They can access it and test drive their own skills. And if they're not ready, they're not ready.
So, not to go too far, but if we're starting to do things that say math pathways and district-wide and recommendations, I put it back to y'all, do we need to have all of our high schools on the same basic scheduling thing? I mean, we can't have some 4x4s in some semesters if we want to be consistent.
Well,
I would leave the flexibility at the school level, but what we do have to get much more intentional about is which schedule which kid is on.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
I'm moving on. I'll just mention this briefly, that Trident Tech, they instituted through this Math Pathways project team a remediation course called, it's a boot camp. It's a 2-week boot camp, and many of the students that will attend Trident Tech will go through this boot camp, and they have seen, as a result of this, there's an active placer test that they take today. And they have seen that by going through this boot camp, 42% of those that took that course improved one level, and another 13% increased by 2 levels in the math placement of courses at Trident Tech. So we've implemented that at Trident Tech, okay? And
That's excellent.
the next thing I wanted to cover is going down, even further down into the K through 3, K through 4. I'll mention that last summer, thank you, Charleston County School District, we instituted a 2-week program. It's called Ongoing Assessment Project. It's OGAP, O-G-A-P, as the acronym. And we had 2 cohorts last summer of students, teachers. And what it's doing is focused on those elementary teachers who must teach all courses, including math. And it's focused on getting those teachers to become even more proficient in teaching math courses. Their math courses or math instruction that they have in those grades. And they saw great results out of that, those first 2 cohorts. The teachers spoke very highly of that program. So what we'd like to do is look at continuing that program moving forward, obtaining additional funding to support all those elementary teachers going through that, what's called OGAP training. Okay. The next area is the supply of and the shortage of qualified math teachers in the region. John, I know you wanted to maybe make a comment or two there.
Well, you may be aware that at the request of that same group of college presidents, we pulled together the deans of 6 colleges of education in the state and mapped out for them just how acute the shortage is, not just for math, but across the state, and how much worse it's going to get. And this district has experienced that as well, and despite its best efforts, it's still got holes to fill. So among the recommendations that that group of deans made was to address compensation for teachers. And you may have seen over the weekend my board positioning itself in support of the recommendation of the superintendent to increase starting salaries by $4,000, and there were other aspects of the recommendation which we don't need to talk about. But the work on math teachers is just a part of a much larger, very serious and ongoing problem that this district and the state is facing.
And I'll just say we're focused right now in 2 areas. One is the Citadel is a part of our team. We have a representative, a professor from the Citadel, and she is working with Charleston County School District and developing a program providing teacher positions when they're still at the student level in the colleges to come in and hopefully receive some compensation for that, but also get the mentoring and training that they need as they're going through college, and so they'll be ready when they come out to teach in the Charleston School District. The other piece of that is really the retention side of this, and we believe that we need to publicize math and teaching much more than it is today, and the importance of it. One of those ways is to recognize your top math professionals in the school district, and so we're putting in place and probably will be conducting the first awards ceremony as a way of publicizing out in the community the importance of the math programs, and then recognizing your best teachers in a recognition program that will probably occur in October of next year. That'll be the first of hopefully many. The last area I want to talk about is, you've talked about math pathways and specific math pathways. The team, the MPPT, the Math Pathways Project team, has always felt and is putting in place a mapping process where a student and the guidance counselors and the parents can actually see, if I want to go into this career or I want to obtain this degree, these are the math courses I must take from the time I enter high school all the way through high school, and if I choose to go on to college, those math courses at those colleges here in the state that they will take to achieve that math career. It's called Math Pathways, and it'll be an online tool that will be available to students, guidance counselors, and parents and teachers to be able to show and demonstrate what courses they have to take. Okay? And I think that's all I was hoping to present today.
No other questions?
There was a question.
I saved mine. Everybody took up too much time. I need to see you. I need to know where this program benefits, implements, helps school. That's all. And you and I get into it.
I hope you're pointing at him.
He's pointing at me.
Excellent.
And one more thing just to close out, and this is just one of my suggestions that I would like for you all to consider. When we start thinking about math, and after I kind of tell you my reasoning, you would definitely, hopefully understand what I'm saying. I really think, when we look at math teachers in general, because we know we have, we have a lot of vacancies across the nation when it comes to teachers, but more specifically our math and science teachers, if we could as a district look at, hiring a few additional math teachers for a number of reasons, because if we see that this is an issue or this is something that we would like to address with making sure that our scholars are ready for STEM-like careers, because we have so much industry around us that when teachers are out on FMLA, when we can't find a teacher, things happen with teachers, and they seem to be our math teachers that we really are committed to doing that with hiring some additional math teachers. And if we have all of our vacancies filled, we could use those teachers to support others, in areas where we, like for instance, our targeted support schools, where we see that our math scores may be, really dismal. So just one of the things I wanted to put out there.
Absolutely. Bench.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Okay, potential consent items.
We moved the,
None of them were potential consent because none of them were unanimous.
I'm fine with the grade configuration is not until January anyway.
Right, it's January.
Right, but the strategic
Make
priorities.
a motion to adjourn the strategic.
Motion.
Move to adjourn.
He's not here.
Let's ask.
We can ask him, when he come back.
Right.
So why don't we adjourn for a quick bathroom break and then we can ask him to come back. We'll do that.
Sure.
And then go to policy.
Too old to sit down.